On a bustling intergalactic trade hub, the air was filled with the hum of various languages, the aroma of exotic spices, and the colorful flurry of traders from countless worlds. At the heart of this cacophony, a human named Jack navigated the crowded aisles of the market with a practiced ease, his eyes scanning the stalls for unique finds. Jack, with his rugged build and easy smile, was a seasoned trader known for his knack for procuring rare artifacts. Today, he was on the hunt for something that could intrigue the collectors back on Earth. As he reached a cluttered stall piled high with ancient gadgets and cosmic relics, his gaze fell upon a striking object, a glowing orb encased in a lattice of alien metal. As he extended his hand to examine it, another hand, slender and distinctly non-human, reached out to touch the same object. Startled, Jack turned to see who the other interested party was. His eyes met those of Lyra, an alien anthropologist with iridescent skin and eyes that shimmered like the twin moons of her home planet. Lyra's expression was one of polite curiosity, her posture poised yet friendly. "Seems we have a similar taste in artifacts," Jack said with a light chuckle, withdrawing his hand slightly to give her space. Lyra tilted her head, her lips curving into a tentative smile. "Indeed, it appears so. This orb is from the early dynastic period of the GA Thursday cluster. It's quite rare. I didn't expect to find one here among common trinkets." Jack's interest peaked, not just in the artifact now, but also in the knowledgeable being before him. "I'm Jack, by the way, a trader from Earth, and you seem to know a lot about this. Mind if I ask your name?" "Lyra," she replied, her voice melodic, almost musical. "I study interstellar cultural artifacts. I'm here to gather items for my research. This orb could tell us a lot about the social hierarchies and ceremonial rites of the Geathurians." Intrigued by her passion for her study and her exotic charm, Jack gestured towards a quieter corner of the market. "Would you like to grab a drink? There's a little cafe just around the corner. We could talk more about it. I'd love to hear about your research." Lyra considered his offer for a moment, then nodded. "That would be delightful. I find human interaction quite fascinating. It's not often I meet one so interested in alien cultures." As they made their way to the cafe, the noise of the market faded into a backdrop for a burgeoning conversation. Seated with a view of the space station's grand vista, Jack listened intently as Lyra shared insights into her anthropological studies. "So, what brings a human trader into the depths of alien cultures? Most wouldn't tread past common commodities," Lyra asked, sipping her drink, a luminous liquid that pulsed gently in her cup. Jack smiled, his eyes twinkling with a mix of adventure and business savvy. "Curiosity, mostly. And the thrill of finding something new. Every piece has a story, and I like to think I'm collecting not just artifacts but stories. Maybe I could add yours to my collection." Lyra laughed, a sound that seemed to mingle perfectly with the ambient hum of the station. "Perhaps, though I suspect my story might be too long for your collection." As the station's artificial night began to fall, lights twinkling on in the market below, Jack and Lyra continued to talk, laying the foundation of a friendship that promised to bridge the vast expanses between their very different worlds. Chapter 2: Language of Gestures. The next day, under the soft glow of the station's light panels mimicking a gentle sunrise, Lyra invited Jack to visit her research quarters. The space was lined with holographic displays and artifacts encased in protective fields, each piece a story from a distant corner of the galaxy. As Jack stepped into the room, his eyes widened in awe. "This is incredible, Lyra. It's like walking through a museum where every exhibit is from a different world." Lyra smiled, pleased by his genuine interest. "It's my life's work. Each artifact here helps us understand the vast diversity of the universe. And today, I could use a human perspective on a few pieces. Would you like to help?" Jack nodded eagerly. "Absolutely. I'd love to contribute however I can." Lyra led him to a desk where several artifacts lay. She picked up a small, intricately carved device. "This is from the Nixian system. We believe it's used in communication, but its function is not fully understood." Jack took the device, turning it over in his hands. "It looks like some sort of transceiver. Maybe it projects messages or creates links between users." He pressed a button cautiously, and the device emitted a series of soft, musical tones. "Interesting interpretation," Lyra noted, jotting down his observations. "Your input might be more valuable than you realize. Different perspectives can unlock new understandings." They moved to another artifact, a fabric that shimmered with an internal light. Jack touched it lightly, and the fabric changed colors. Seems to be responsive to touch. Maybe it's used for mood indication or social signaling. Lyra's eyes sparkled with excitement. A novel hypothesis. We hadn't considered touch as a factor in its function. Their collaborative session continued, with Jack suggesting practical, human-centric uses for the alien technologies, while Lyra provided cultural and historical context. The exchange was lively, with laughter and shared astonishment at the mysteries they uncovered. After several hours, they took a break, sitting down with cups of a steaming beverage that Lyra recommended. It's a traditional drink from my home planet. It helps stimulate mental clarity, she explained. As they sipped the warm liquid, Jack turned the conversation towards Lyra. You know so much about other cultures, Lyra. But I realize I know very little about yours. What's it like? Where you come from? Lyra's expression softened. My world is very different from this station. We live in harmony with our planet's ecosystem. It's a world of vast oceans and floating cities. Maybe one day I could show you. Jack leaned in, intrigued. I'd like that. It's one thing to hear about a place, another to see it through the eyes of someone who loves it. They spent the rest of their break discussing their homeworlds, finding common ground in differences. As the break ended, Jack stood, stretching. Thanks for this, Lyra. Not just the knowledge, but the hospitality. How can I return the favor? Lyra thought for a moment. Teach me something about Earth. Something personal, maybe about your favorite place. Jack grinned. Deal. How about tomorrow we take a tour of Earth through the station's VR chambers? I can show you where I grew up, the mountains, the lakes. It's not floating cities, but it's home. Lyra nodded, her face alight with anticipation. I would like that very much, Jack. As Jack left Lyra's quarters, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Not only was he gaining a unique insight into alien cultures, but he was also forming a bond that transcended the usual trader interactions. It was a connection based on mutual curiosity and respect, a foundation strong enough to bridge the gap between worlds. Chapter 3: Dinner Under the Stars. The artificial twilight of the space station settled over its endless corridors, casting a warm glow through softly pulsing lights. Jack busied himself at the small dining nook he'd set up on the viewing deck, arranging the final touches of a meal that was, in many ways, a gamble. It was a blend of dishes from earthen foods he'd sourced through careful negotiation with various traders, a mix meant to honor Lyra's culture and tantalize her palate. He paused, looking out at the endless sprawl of stars beyond the deck's transparent dome. The idea of sharing this with Lyra made him a little nervous, and that realization surprised him. He was accustomed to navigating trade deals, tense negotiations, and risky ventures. Yet this felt different, more personal. The sound of approaching footsteps drew his attention. Lyra stepped onto the deck, her presence somehow making the vast expanse of space feel less overwhelming. She wore a flowing garment that shimmered in hues of green and blue, shifting with her movements. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, neither spoke. Jack, this is breathtaking, Lyra said, her voice tinged with wonder. The stars, the setting, and is that Earth food I smell? Jack grinned, feeling his nerves ease. I hope so. I did my best. Welcome to a blend of our worlds, Earth cuisine, and hopefully some dishes you might recognize too. They sat across from each other, a small table separating them. Jack poured a translucent drink into a glass and offered it to Lyra. It's a traditional Earth aperitif. Care to try? She raised the glass, sniffed it curiously, and took a sip. Her expression shifted from surprise to delight. Different. Complex. Just like its maker, Jack quipped, eliciting a laugh from her. The sound warmed the air between them. As they moved through the courses, they talked of their worlds, their experiences, and their dreams. Jack found himself captivated not just by what Lyra shared, but by how she spoke, her words imbued with a mix of passion and gentle introspection. Your home sounds beautiful, Jack said, leaning forward. Floating cities? Oceans stretching beyond sight? I'd like to see it one day. Lyra's gaze drifted to the stars. And I would like to show you. But it's more than the scenery. My people's lives are intertwined with the waters. We honor them. Every celebration, every rite, revolves around them. So what would be considered an important celebration? Jack asked, genuinely curious. She smiled, a hint of mischief playing on her lips. One that's private. 4-2. Oh. Jack's eyebrows arched. Are you suggesting I need to take a swim to understand it? Lyra laughed to sound like music. Perhaps, but not tonight. She gestured to the dish in front of them. Tell me more about this. You said it's a specialty? Jack explained each ingredient, the history behind it, and its significance in human culture. She listened intently, savoring not just the food but the stories woven through it. As they ate, Jack noticed her eyes lingering on the stars beyond them. You seem lost in thought, he said softly. Lyra nodded, placing her utensils down. I am. This moment feels significant. In my culture, we believe that when you dine under the stars with someone and share a genuine connection, it creates a bond that stretches beyond space and time. Jack considered her words, then reached across the table, placing his hand over hers. I'd like to believe that too. For a moment, they simply sat in silence, the enormity of the universe pressing against the glass of the viewing dome, but it felt distant, irrelevant. Here, under this simulated night sky, only the two of them mattered. Tell me, Jack, Lyra said, her voice lower now. What drives you? Why seek the stars when Earth holds so much? He looked down, thoughtful. I guess part of it is curiosity, the desire to see what's out there, to know more than just what I've always known. But lately, it feels like it's about more than that. He met her gaze. It's about finding connections that matter. Her hand turned in his, fingers entwining. Connections are rare. I value this one. As their conversation continued, Jack brought out a final surprise, a small musical instrument. This is something from Earth. Music speaks when words can't. Mind if I try? Lyra nodded, eyes gleaming with anticipation. Jack played a slow, haunting melody, each note resonating in the stillness. When he finished, silence hung between them, charged and meaningful. That was beautiful, Lyra whispered. Thank you for sharing it. It's just a start, Jack said, smiling. I think we have many more melodies to create. Lyra rose, stepping closer, her eyes never leaving his. Perhaps, Jack, you are right. They stood beneath the stars, their hands joined, feeling the pull of something both familiar and entirely new. Whatever lay ahead, they knew that their connection, formed over shared meals, stories, and a desire to bridge worlds, would guide them. As they left the viewing deck together, their steps felt lighter, as if the weight of the universe was somehow easier to bear with someone by your side. Chapter 4, A Walk Through Memories. The virtual reality chamber hummed softly as its systems powered up, casting a pale glow that lit the enclosed space in waves. Lyra stood at the control panel, adjusting settings with swift, practiced movements. Jack watched her with fascination, admiring not just her efficiency, but the elegant fluidity of her gestures. She turned to him, her eyes reflecting the blue light of the interface. Are you ready, Jack? She asked, her voice calm but with an undercurrent of excitement. This simulation is as close as you'll get to my homeworld without actually visiting. Jack nodded, stepping closer. Show me everything, Lyra. I want to see it all. She smiled, placing a slender hand on the activation pad. Then hold on. The chamber's walls dissolved into nothingness, leaving them standing on an endless expanse of water. Above, two pale suns glimmered in a turquoise sky, and the air was alive with the scent of salt and blooms carried by the wind. Jack's eyes widened as he took in the view. Is this? He began, his voice hushed. My world, Lyra finished, stepping onto a shimmering pathway that materialized beneath her feet. Come with me. Jack followed, the sensation of the simulated ground beneath him feeling uncannily real. They walked together, the pathway winding above the gentle waves. Lyra pointed to floating structures in the distance, great domed cities, drifting serenely on the water's surface. Those are our homes, she explained, pride coloring her voice. Our people have lived like this for centuries. The oceans provide everything we need, food, energy. Even our traditions are tied to the water. Jack took it all in. It's breathtaking, Lyra. I've never seen anything like it. They continued along the path until it brought them to one of the floating cities. The structures were a blend of organic curves and intricate patterns, with water streaming down their surfaces like living veins. As they stepped inside, the simulation adapted, presenting a bustling marketplace filled with Lyra's people, tall, graceful beings who moved with purpose and fluidity. Here, Lyra said, leading him to a stall displaying what appeared to be delicate, glowing shells. These are called Miralon. They capture the essence of our ocean's energy. We use them for light, warmth, even for healing. Jack picked up a shell, feeling its warmth seep into his hand. Everything here seems connected, like nothing exists apart from the whole. Lyra nodded, her eyes softening. That's our way. Harmony, Jack. It's more than tradition, it's life itself. He placed the shell back, thoughtful. It must be difficult, then, to leave. To be here on the station, so far from all this. There was a pause before she spoke. It is, but I chose this path because I believe understanding between different peoples matters. And my work helps bridge even a small gap between cultures. It's worth it. Jack looked at her, sensing the weight behind her words. I respect that, Lyra. I really do. They continued their walk through the city, eventually reaching an elevated platform that overlooked the endless ocean. Lyra gestured for Jack to sit beside her on a bench carved from what looked like coral. This spot is important to me, she said quietly. It's where I used to come to think, to reflect. Jack leaned back, savoring the view. I can see why. It feels peaceful. They sat in silence for a while, the simulated suns dipping lower in the sky. Finally, Jack turned to her. What about memories, Lyra? Can you bring them here, too? She hesitated, then nodded. Yes, we can create personalized simulations based on memories. Would you like to see one? Only if you're comfortable sharing it, Jack said gently. Lyra closed her eyes, and the scenery around them shifted. They now stood on a small rocky island surrounded by rough waves. A younger version of Lyra stood at the edge, facing the sea, her posture tense. Jack watched, unsure of what was happening. That's me, Lyra said, her voice distant. This was my rite of solitude. Every child must endure a period of isolation and survive with nothing but their wits and connection to the ocean. Jack frowned. That sounds harsh. It's meant to teach us self-reliance, Lyra explained. I was terrified. But in the end, I learned to trust myself and the sea. The younger Lyra stood on the rocks, the waves crashing around her. She raised her arms, and the water calmed, rippling in response. Jack felt a surge of admiration. You tamed it, he said, his voice filled with awe. I formed a bond, Lyra corrected gently. The sea tamed me just as much. The memory dissolved, leaving them back on the platform under the now-setting suns. Lyra's shoulders were tense, and Jack reached for her hand. Thank you for sharing that, he said quietly. I can see how it shaped you. She looked at him, her gaze searching. Why, Jack? Why do you care so much? Because it matters, he said, his grip firm but gentle. Because you matter. The moment hung between them, charged and fragile. Then Lyra leaned closer, her voice low. This connection, it's unfamiliar. But I think I want to explore it. So do I, Jack replied, his heart pounding. Their faces drew nearer, and for a moment, it seemed like the entire universe had shrunk to just the two of them. But then a soft chime echoed through the chamber, signaling the end of their session. The simulation dissolved, leaving them back in the cold, sterile confines of the station's VR chamber. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Lyra turned to him, a hint of a smile on her lips. Perhaps another walk through memories sometime. I'd like that, Jack said, his voice steady. More than anything. They walked out of the chamber side by side, their steps echoing softly. The vastness of space awaited them, but in this moment, they knew they had already begun to bridge it together. Chapter 5, The Human Touch. The docking bay was quiet as Jack led Lyra aboard his ship, a modest but well-maintained vessel he called the Horizon's Edge. To him, it was more than a ship. It was home, a piece of earth hurtling through the stars. As they stepped inside, Jack felt a rush of anticipation. This would be the first time Lyra had seen his world, through his eyes. Lyra's gaze swept over the interior, taking the compact yet efficient design of the ship. It's different from the ships of my people, she remarked, trailing her fingers along the edge of a polished metal table. Every surface here feels utilitarian, but also personal. Human ships aren't as elegant as yours, Jack admitted with a grin. But we make them work. He led her through the narrow corridors, pointing out the ship's quirks. Over here is the engine room, he said, pausing in front of a reinforced door. She's old, but she's reliable. Got me through more than a few tight spots. Lyra peered through the small window. Your technology is different. I'd love to understand it better. May I? Jack pushed the door open. Be my guest. They stepped into the engine room. its walls lined with glowing conduits and panels. Lyra moved with a scientist's curiosity, examining the mechanics with focused interest. This design, does it operate on a closed-loop energy system? Not exactly, Jack said, moving beside her. We use a hybrid core. See that module? It regulates the energy flow, but it's sensitive. You've got to handle it just right, or it'll overheat. He demonstrated by adjusting a small lever, the core responding with a gentle hum. Lyra watched intently, then reached out to mimic his movements. Her hand, delicate and graceful, brushed against his as she grasped the lever. Like this, she asked, her eyes meeting his. Yeah, Jack replied, his voice catching. Exactly like that. Their hands lingered a moment too long, the air between them heavy with unspoken words. Lyra was the first to break eye contact, focusing again on the machinery. Your methods are different, but I admire how you make it work with limited resources. Jack chuckled, stepping back to give her space. Humans have a knack for making do. They left the engine room and made their way to the common area. Jack gestured to a comfortable-looking seat. Have a seat. I'll grab us something. Lyra sank into the chair, watching as Jack opened a compartment and pulled out 2 mugs. You mentioned you'd show me something from Earth, she reminded him. Right, Jack said, setting the mugs down and activating a small hollow projector on the table. The room dimmed, and a 3-dimensional image sprang to life, a vast mountain range, its peaks capped with snow, stretching as far as the eye could see. The air seemed to shimmer with cold, crisp beauty. This is where I grew up, Jack said quietly, his gaze distant. The Montera Mountains. Spent most of my childhood running through those valleys. It's beautiful, Lyra said, her voice soft. So different from my world's oceans, but equally alive. He leaned forward, his eyes never leaving the projection. I wanted you to see this because it's a part of me. It's what I carry out here in the stars. No matter how far I go, it reminds me of where I come from. Lyra studied the image, then turned to him. I understand. We all carry pieces of home with us. It shapes who we are. The image shifted to show a small cabin nestled in a forest clearing. Jack's lips curled into a wistful smile. That's my family's cabin. My father built it with his own hands. You miss it, Lyra observed. Every day, Jack admitted. But out here, you learn to live with that kind of longing. Silence fell between them, comfortable yet poignant. Then, Lyra reached for his hand, intertwining their fingers. You've shown me something deeply personal. Thank you. Jack squeezed her hand gently. I'm glad you're here to see it. They sat like that for a while, their hands joined as they watched the shifting images of Earth. Finally, Lyra spoke. You've given me something rare, a glimpse into your heart. I want to offer you something in return. What is it? Jack asked, curious. Lyra stood, guiding him back to the control room of the ship. She accessed the communication terminal and brought up a projection, a series of glowing symbols that danced and swirled in intricate patterns. This, she explained, is an ancient chant from my people. It represents unity, a bond forged through shared experience. Jack watched, captivated by the shimmering display. It's beautiful. What do the symbols mean? Each one represents a memory, Lyra said, her voice low. Together, they form a story. And now, we are a part of each other's stories. Moved, Jack reached out to touch one of the symbols. It pulsed under his fingertips, responding to his presence. Thank you, Lyra. This means more than I can say. She nodded, her gaze steady. Words are not always necessary, Jack. Sometimes, it's the touch, the connection. The symbols continued to swirl around them, their glow casting soft light across the room. Jack turned to Lyra, his voice thick with emotion. I think we've just started something incredible. Indeed, she said, stepping closer. And I look forward to where it takes us. Together, they stood surrounded by symbols and stars, feeling the weight of the universe fade away. It was just them, 2 beings from different worlds, finding common ground and forging a bond stronger than anything either had expected. As they lingered in the soft light, they both knew that this was only the beginning of their journey together. Chapter 6. Her Alien Tremble. The soft hum of the ship's interior created a soothing backdrop as Jack and Lyra stood in the common area, the dimmed lights casting a gentle glow around them. There was an unspoken tension in the air, an electricity that neither could deny, though neither seemed quite ready to name it. Lyra took a tentative step closer, her gaze unwavering. Your world is so different, Jack. So grounded and physical. I have felt disoriented at times, but in a way that makes me want to know more. Jack met her eyes, sensing the depth of what she was saying. You're not alone, Lyra. Meeting you has changed how I see everything. My past, my future. It's all more. They stood inches apart now, the gap between them charged with expectation. Jack raised a hand, brushing a strand of shimmering hair from her face. She leaned into the touch, eyes closing for a moment as if savoring it. I've never felt like this, she whispered, her voice unsteady but resolute. Not with anyone. Me neither, Jack replied softly, his thumb tracing the edge of her jaw. It real. The moment stretched, and then, as if by mutual agreement, they closed the distance between them. Their lips met, tentative at first, then more urgent as they both gave in to the pull that had been building between them. Lyra's touch was light, almost hesitant, but as Jack deepened a kiss, she responded with a passion that surprised even herself. Their hands explored, Jack's fingers tracing the contours of her shoulders, Lyra's delicate hands gliding down his arms. Each touch seemed to ignite something within them, a connection that transcended language or culture. They pulled apart briefly, both breathing heavily. Lyra's eyes searched his face. Is this what you imagined? Jack cupped her face in his hands. I didn't imagine this, but I don't want it to stop. She smiled, a mix of shyness and desire. Then it won't. They moved together again, this time with a slow, deliberate intensity. Jack guided her to a soft, cushioned alcove, their movements becoming more fluid and natural. Lyra's skin seemed to glow faintly in response to his touch, each caress sending ripples of light across her form. It was mesmerizing, and Jack paused, captivated. You're beautiful, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Lyra's response was to pull him closer, her body trembling with anticipation. They kissed again, their hands learning the curves and lines of each other. Jack marveled at the way her body responded, the way she trembled under his touch, not with fear, but with pleasure. As they lay together, they moved slowly, savoring every moment, every breath, every sensation. It was as if time had slowed, allowing them to fully immerse themselves in the connection they had forged. Lyra's breaths came in soft gasps, her eyes wide as she experienced each new sensation. Jack held her, guiding her, and together they explored the boundaries of what it meant to truly connect. At one point, she pressed her forehead to his, their breaths mingling. I never thought I could feel like this, she admitted, her voice raw with vulnerability. Neither did I, Jack said, his hands gentle as they traced her skin. But I don't want it to end. It doesn't have to, Lyra whispered, her body shivering against his. We can make this more. As they continued, their movements grew more in sync, their bodies attuned to one another in a way that was both surprising and deeply natural. Lyra's trembles intensified, and Jack held her tightly, his own heart pounding. They moved together, their connection deepening with every touch, every shared breath. Finally, as the intensity peaked, Lyra gasped, her body trembling in his arms. She clung to him, her eyes wide and filled with a mix of wonder and joy. Your touch, she breathed. It makes me feel alive. Jack kissed her forehead, his voice thick with emotion. I'm glad, Lyra. You do the same for me. They lay together in the aftermath, their bodies entwined. The soft light of the ship bathed them in a warm glow, and for a long moment, they simply held each other, letting the reality of their bond settle over them. Jack, Lyra said eventually, her voice soft but steady. This connection we share, it means more than I can express. I know, he replied, tightening his hold on her, and I'm not going anywhere. They fell silent, content in the knowledge that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. In that moment, beneath the stars and the soft hum of the ship's systems, they knew they had found something rare, something worth holding on to. Lyra shifted, resting her head on his chest. Your touch, it changed everything. And I tremble because of it. Jack smiled, pressing a kiss to her hair. Then we'll keep building this together. And as they drifted into a peaceful silence, the universe outside seemed a little less vast, a little less lonely. They had each other, and for now that was more than enough. Chapter 7, Beyond Worlds. The view from the ship's observation deck was nothing short of breathtaking. An unfamiliar celestial body loomed before them, a planet shrouded in shifting ribbons of green and gold light. Jack had never seen anything like it. The holographic display on the console flickered to life, and Lyra adjusted a few controls, her focus intense. "It's known as Tarelis," she said, her voice quiet yet filled with a reverent awe. "A sacred place for my people. Rarely visited, rarely shared." Jack turned to her, sensing the weight behind her words. "Why did you bring me here?" Lyra met his gaze, her eyes shimmering. "Because I trust you. And because this place, it has significance for those who seek unity and understanding." Jack nodded, feeling the gravity of her statement settle over him. "Then let's see it together." They descended to the planet's surface in a small shuttle, the atmospheric entry smooth and seamless. As the shuttle touched down, Jack could see that the landscape was unlike anything he'd ever encountered. Rolling plains of luminescent grass stretched out in every direction, and great crystalline structures jutted from the earth, refracting light in dazzling displays. "It's beautiful," he whispered as they stepped out onto the soft ground. Lyra nodded, her gaze distant. "It is more than beauty, Jack. This place is alive. Everything you see, it responds to those who walk upon it. But it requires a harmony of spirit." She extended her hand, and he took it without hesitation. As they walked together, the ground beneath them pulsed softly, each step leaving trails of light in their wake. Jack could feel a subtle vibration through his boots, as if the very planet were humming with life. "What happens here?" Jack asked, his voice low, respectful of the silence around them. "Rituals of connection," Lyra replied. "Between people, between our kind in this world. When two beings come here and their spirits are aligned, the planet reveals wonders." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Aligned how?" Lyra paused, turning to him. "It means being open, vulnerable. It means truly seeing each other." Jack considered her words, then nodded. "I'm ready." They walked on, their hands intertwined, until they reached the base of a towering crystal structure. Lyra placed her free hand on its surface, and a soft hum resonated through the air. The crystal began to glow, casting prismatic light that danced across their faces. "Place your hand beside mine," she instructed. Jack did as she asked, feeling warmth radiate from the crystal. Suddenly, the light intensified, enveloping them both. Images flickered before his eyes, memories, moments from their journey together. Their first meeting at the marketplace, their shared meals, the way her hand trembled when they first touched. It was all laid bare, raw and unfiltered. "It's showing us," Lyra whispered, her voice tinged with emotion. "Everything we are to each other." Jack's throat tightened. He saw himself through Lyra's eyes, saw the respect, the admiration, the fear of loss. And he felt her emotions as if they were his own. "This is incredible," he said, his voice cracking. "I didn't know." Lyra nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "Neither did I." The light shifted, and new images appeared, glimpses of what could be. A future where they continued to explore together, to grow, to forge a bond stronger than any distance or difference. Jack reached for her, and they held each other tightly as the visions unfolded. When the light finally dimmed, they were left standing in silence, their hands still on the crystal. Jack turned to Lyra, his voice steady. "I want that future." Lyra nodded, her eyes full of determination. "So do I." They stepped back, the crystal's glow fading but leaving a warmth within them both. Jack took a deep breath, feeling more connected to Lyra and to himself than ever before. "What now?" he asked. "Now," Lyra said, a hint of a smile tugging at her lips, "we honor what we've seen, and we continue to walk this path together." Their journey across Tarelis continued, each step bringing new wonders. At one point, they came across a field of translucent flowers that bloomed as they approached, releasing a soft, melodic sound that echoed through the air. "What is this?" Jack asked, marveling at the display. "A sign of acceptance," Lyra explained, her voice filled with quiet pride. "It means we have been acknowledged." Jack laughed softly, feeling a surge of joy. "So, the planet likes us." "It would seem so," she replied, her own laughter mingling with his. "But it is not just the planet. It is a reflection of what we bring." They stood among the blooming flowers, their hands still joined. Jack turned to her, his expression serious. "Thank you for bringing me here, Lyra. It means more than I can say." She squeezed his hand. "Thank you for being open, for trusting me." As they made their way back to the shuttle, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the plains. The light dimmed, but the glow of their connection remained strong. Together, they boarded the shuttle, leaving the sacred world behind but carrying its lessons with them. Back on the ship, they sat in silence for a long time, reflecting on what they had seen and felt. Finally, Lyra spoke, her voice soft but resolute. "This journey is far from over, Jack. There will be challenges, but I believe we can face them." Jack nodded, his gaze steady. Together. And in that moment, as the stars outside their ship began to blur into motion, they knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it side by side. For they had walked beyond worlds and found something worth holding on to, something neither had thought possible until now. Chapter 8. Promises Under Cosmic Skies. The stars stretched out endlessly as Jack and Lyra stood on the observation deck, the ship's viewport offering a spectacular view of the cosmos. It was their favorite place, a haven where they could watch the universe unfurl before them, a reminder of both its vastness and their place within it. Tonight, however, the stars seemed closer, more intimate. Jack leaned against the railing, his gaze fixed on the swirling colors of a distant nebula. "It feels different now," he said, his voice low and thoughtful. Lyra stepped closer, her presence both grounding and electric. "What does?" "The stars," he replied. "They used to be just places to explore. Distant, cold, fascinating, but lonely. Now there's something else. They remind me of what we've shared, what we've found." Lyra nodded, her eyes reflecting the nebula's light. "I understand. For a long time, my purpose was rooted in study, in understanding cultures without ever truly connecting. Now, I see the stars differently, too." They fell into a comfortable silence, the hum of the ship's systems the only sound around them. Jack turned, reaching for her hand. "Do you ever think about what's next?" She squeezed his hand gently. "Every day. There's so much unknown, so much yet to experience. But as long as we're together, I believe we can face anything." A smile touched his lips. "That's what I was hoping you'd say." He pulled her closer, their foreheads resting together, breaths mingling. For a moment, the universe seemed to hold its breath. When Jack spoke again, his words were filled with both strength and vulnerability. "Lyra, I want this to be more than just a chapter in some fleeting journey." Her eyes searched his, luminous and deep. "You want a future together." "Yes," he said, his voice unwavering. "Not just as two beings traveling the stars, but as something more. Partners. Maybe more than that, someday." Lyra's gaze softened, and she leaned in, their lips meeting in a kiss that spoke of promises made without words. When they pulled apart, she took a step back, a thoughtful expression on her face. "There is a tradition among my people," she began, "a vow that binds two souls. It is not taken lightly, but once made, it is unbreakable." Jack's curiosity was piqued. "Tell me more." She moved to a small console on the wall, tapping a series of commands. A soft light filled the room, and a holographic symbol appeared, a delicate spiral surrounded by smaller orbs. "This is the symbol of the vow. To make it, two beings must share their deepest truths and accept each other fully. No barriers, no secrets." Jack stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm ready." Lyra hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "As am I." They stood facing each other, the symbol glowing softly between them. "The vow begins with truth," Lyra said. "I will go first." She took a deep breath. "Jack, I have always feared losing myself, becoming so absorbed in my mission that I would forget who I am. Meeting you changed that. You reminded me of what it means to live, to feel, to connect. I will not let that go." Her words hung in the air, raw and unguarded. Jack reached for her hands, holding them tightly. "My turn," he said. "I've always been afraid of letting people in. It's easier to keep moving, to focus on the next trade, the next journey. But you broke through that. You showed me that there's more to life than just surviving. I don't want to run anymore." The symbol between them flared, casting light across their joined hands. Lyra's voice was steady, but her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Then with this vow, I bind my soul to yours. I will walk beside you through every challenge, every joy, every unknown path." Jack's grip tightened. "And I vow to stand by you, no matter what, to share everything I have, everything I am, and to build a future together." The light around them grew brighter, enveloping them in warmth. For a moment, it felt as though the universe itself bore witness to their bond. When the light faded, The symbol lingered briefly before disappearing, leaving only the quiet and their steady heartbeats. "It is done," Lyra said softly. Jack pulled her into an embrace, holding her as if he never intended to let go. "We did it." "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "We did." They remained like that for a long time, finding comfort and strength in each other's arms. Finally, Jack pulled back, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "So what now?" Lyra smiled, a genuine, radiant expression that lit up her face. "Now we see where this path leads. Together." They turned back to the viewport, the stars spreading out before them. This time, they felt less like distant destinations and more like promises of what could be. As they stood side by side, their hands entwined, they knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it as one. "Ready?" Jack asked, his voice filled with both anticipation and resolve. "Always," Lyra replied, her grip firm and sure. With that, they stepped forward, their journey continuing under the endless expanse of cosmic skies, a journey shaped by love, trust, and the unbreakable bond they had forged. Together, they would chart a course that was uniquely theirs, defying distance, difference, and anything else the universe dared to place in their way.